Hello, welcome back to the special edition of the AI Agent Builder Summit, featuring the proven best practices and solutions of industry leaders in agentic AI. I am Scott Hebner, the Principal Analyst for AI here at SiliconANGLE Media and theCUBE Research. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this session, we'll discuss how businesses are adopting and scaling agentic AI solutions, reshaping internal processes, and preparing their workforces for the next wave of intelligent systems. And critically, how to speed the deployment of trustworthy and secure AI agents. This discussion will feature Sema4.ai, a pioneer shaping the future of digital labor, powered by an enterprise-grade agentic AI platform, and Rackspace Technology, a multi-vendor or a multi-cloud solutions provider that helps enterprises design, deploy, manage cloud-native AI systems, all within a secure and scalable infrastructure. Today, you'll also learn why and how Sema4.ai and Rackspace Technology are partnering to help clients bridge the gap between AI experimentation and full-scale enterprise adoption, enabling businesses to build and run and scale production-ready AI agents with built-in governance, transparency, and security. To tell us more, I'm thrilled to be joined by Ram Venkatesh, the CTO and co-founder of Sema4.ai, and Srini Koushik, the president of AI and sustainability at Rackspace Technology. Welcome to both of you on the show. Appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having us, Scott. Yep.
And Ram, it's great to see you again. We've been spending a lot of time together on these sessions. So
likewise, happy to be back.
It's great to see you. So let's start by providing our audience just a little bit of background on the partnership that you have formed. Ram, maybe you can start here, then Srini, you can chime in a little bit more context.
Yeah, look, the last time we spoke about what is special about building agents for a business, right? And the whole build process and how data makes agents accurate and all of that. That's just day one. You're getting started. Right? So if you think of the life cycle for the enterprise customer, it's about building the agent, and then it's about securely, safely deploying the agent in production. And then it's about improving the agent continuously over time. So for all of those reasons, these are two important parts of the same coin. And we are very excited that while we are bringing a lot of focus to how you build an accurate agent, Rackspace is our chosen partner for how do you get it deployed in a mission-critical enterprise context in the most expedient and efficient way. So at the macro level, it's that simple. The combination of these two means you can now create agents and then deploy them with confidence to run your business on them.
And Srini?
Well, I think Ram said it, right? I do think that Sema4 as a platform, while one of the users ends up being the developers who build these agents, and we're absolutely interested in that user base as well. The major attraction for us was, if you think about who Rackspace is, we've built our name, reputation, and the 25 plus years of experience on supporting and operating these application and data workloads, in a very secure, compliant way. So it's not a stretch to say day 2+ is our business, right? Our job and most CIOs' jobs start after you put something into production. So for us, Sema4 was a great partner because if you kind of start there, that's your outcome, because your outcome is not just to build an agent, it is to operate it so that you deliver those outcomes. We thought it was a great idea because they stress that they fundamentally have that as part of their product. We believe that this partnership was excellent for us to kind of, it plays to our strengths, and it is something that we could bring value to the partnership.
Yeah, my take on this is, having been studying this marketplace and talking to tons and tons of different types of companies, is that you guys are on to absolutely the right emphasis point here, which is, the overriding concern that we're seeing here is trust, right? Are these agents going to be trustworthy? And obviously that has a lot of, pieces to what people mean by trust, but security, right? Compliance, the ability to govern them, especially when you start adapting your agentic workflows or your agents, and there's all types of studies out there from everyone from Bain to McKinsey to Gartner that are illustrating that's the overriding concern. So what I love about you two as companies is you're so in tune with your customers that creating this partnership, I think, is really, really important, because without trust, there's not going to be any ROI, right? And so we'll get into that in much more detail here. And actually, that kind of leads me, Ram, to, what are you seeing in terms of enterprises using AI agents, to create value for the business and transform their operating models? You've been very engaged with, a cross section of customers. What are you learning from them as we kind of get into this early stage of agentic AI?
Yeah, I think that for many customers, I think agentic AI now represents, this is the tip of the spear for how they are going to realize value from Gen AI. Right? Like they've seen the promise of LLMs, they understand how transformational understanding languages and all of that. But how do they actually get value from it? At the end of the day, it has to be a thing that you deploy to run your business. Right. So I think that most customers are now coming to the conclusion that agents are the way that they are going to realize a lot of the perceived value from Gen AI. And that's amazing that we've gotten here in just like 12 to 15 short months. But now you're in this environment where there's a lot of choices out there for customers, but now they realize that they have to make a strategic bet on how they're going to deploy AI. Right? So deploying AI, I think, is no longer, it's not a tactical, I want to solve one use case. It is, how do I transform my entire business with AI? Right? And we've seen this play out very nicely in the big data space, for example, where if some technology is transformational, they are looking for, it's a partnership that they really need with solution providers like ourselves and Rackspace, right? So where there is strategic alignment, where the customer says, this is how I'm going to use AI to transform my business with agents, they are looking at not just a couple agents or a dozen agents, but this could be hundreds and thousands of agents, and they can see the path to that. It's one thing for us as providers to see, the promise of that, but we are seeing that customers are themselves realizing that that's what they need to plan for in the medium term. And this is where I believe that this partnership and the way we are approaching security and trust and governance, that lets our customers experiment with a lot of confidence and then get use cases into production.
Yeah, and Srini, as Ram points out, when you start talking about hundreds to thousands of agents, it's unlikely that they're all going to be running on the exact same infrastructure. They could be on different clouds. And that's another element of what Rackspace is doing, correct?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think at Rackspace, our tagline is, we are that AI and hybrid cloud company. And I think it is increasingly becoming more hybrid as we get into this agentic space, because Ram hinted at it. This thing is moving so quickly from traditional AI and ML models into generative AI based on LLM to reasoning models that actually now can reason, but also reach out to the external world through tools and connectivity. And when you start thinking about that as the foundation for agents, you can start thinking about so many processes that you can either implement autonomous agents or agents that have a human in the loop, for you to be able to drive that type of change, what you're looking for from an efficiency, from a consistency, the standard, those types of things that we've all been talking about as outcomes that come out of generative AI. I think you start to realize them with this. And I think the hybrid aspect that you pointed out is really important, because I think even by hyperscalers' estimation, 70% of the workloads still sit in private data centers and in private cloud providers. So if you're really going to use agents that drive business outcomes, you're going to have to figure out a way to connect into that and get it. And that's fundamentally where we feel like we're in the right spot for the business. And with a partner like Sema4, we're able to kind of realize that dream of building and operating hundreds and thousands of agents for customers.
Yeah, and I certainly second this notion of the speed of advancements, particularly in AI. If you kind of look back at all the technology transformational cycles going all the way back to probably client server, long time ago, they tend to be faster and faster, right? And we get to a point now where where with AI, it's moving, the innovations are moving at warp speed.
Yeah.
And I've been making the point to the people I talk to that you have to be really careful. Unlike the cloud area, you have to be really careful not to fall behind because you may never catch up.
Yeah.
And it's only been a few years, right, with generative AI coming on the scene. Now we're moving on to agents. And so I'm curious too, as you talk to business leaders that are trying to navigate all these shifts and how AI is reshaping the enterprise. And at the same time, things are moving so unbelievably fast. What are they telling you from like a business perspective?
Look, from our end, like when the customers that I talked about, which by the way, I run the Foundry for AI by Rackspace, right? We've got a two-pronged mission. The first one is to transform Rackspace into an AI company. We don't want to be these hypocrites that go tell customers to use agents if we're not using it ourselves. And then the second part of it is based on that experience of implementing it and understanding how to build that security. We want to be able to go have these conversations with customers. And in those things, what's ironic about where they are right now is I very rarely run into any business leader these days who doesn't understand the potential of AI. However, what I start seeing is a lot of things that the perception tends to change slowly, right? Because the types of things I'm hearing are the same things we heard earlier. Well, AI hallucinates, like we got to get all of our data supply chain fixed, and all of those other things are still what's sitting in people's heads. And what we're trying to unpack for them is, look, when you get to agentic AI, data is always going to be important. But when you get to agentic AI, you don't have to fix your entire data infrastructure for you to take advantage of agents today, because you're connecting into your core systems. It hasn't gone through transformation. You can let the agents reason and do, like, exactly. Ram's the expert in the space, but everyone's been talking in data about ETL. This is a place where you can actually do ELT, extract the data from the core systems and let the reasoning thing do the transformation as it's needed. So it is really a significant shift, which we expect more of these AI solutions to go into productions. And our job is to help customers understand what is possible today. And if it's not possible today, just wait 3 months. It'll be possible in 3 months.
Right. All right. And Ram, obviously Sema4.ai has been on the leading edge here of doing some innovative stuff with your clients. I think back to this session we did with Emerson as an example of that. But curious to your views on, how agentic AI adopters choose their first use case, right? And what were the lessons that were learned by the customers you've been working with as they go forward? And what advice do you have for people that are sort of just getting started with more of a true agentic, strategy?
Yeah, I think for us, this is a very existential question. This comes up for probably every second or third level customer conversation, because part of this is they're only constrained by the imagination of what they need to do for their business. But the flexibility with which you can apply agentic, I think agentic is going to show up at different layers in the stack. And so people have, one of the things that we kind of help customers understand is it's just horses for courses. There are different kinds of agents that are going to be relevant for different parts of your business. I think the higher level strategic parts of the organizations, what they're trying to figure out is, how do I use AI to actually implement the outcomes that I already know about that are best in class for my business? How do I get that with a level of repeatability and scale and efficiency as to what I'm doing today? Right. So this means, the lens through which you can look at it is, we generally say, okay, if you don't know how the work is supposed to be done today, by definition, that's not an agentic use case. Because this is not this magic black box where you go feed in all your data and it's going to tell you the answer is 42. That's not agentic at all. You have to know what the good outcomes are. You have to know when that outcome fits into the workflow that you're doing. So you need to know, to put it bluntly, what agent you want to build, right? Then second piece is that you need to make sure that you understand what great looks like for the agent yourself first, before you worry about, like, can you guarantee that outcome? Can you do guardrails? Can you do hallucinations? All this other stuff that we want to apply to it. But the basic fundamental thing is, are these outcomes tangible enough that you can describe them to me in a way that I can then say, here is how you're going to build an instrumentation and measurement framework around it. And usually, if you can start from there, then that gives you a nice frame. And interestingly, I think that people can spend a lot of time thinking about ROI, and they should. But I think that there's a muscle of what does agentic look like, and this a lot more strategic leaders have come around to this. If somebody else is building the agents for your business, you have already been disintermediated. You're just finding it out after the fact, right? So this is why I think it's not so much about like what's the use case do I apply agentic to. The right question is ask is how do I leverage AI and become agentic so that all of the most important use cases that I have are implemented in an agentic way. So this turns that whole conversation in and out. From a strategy standpoint, they just can't ignore this. The question is, how do you embrace it? How do you leverage it? How do you deploy it? And how do you get value from it? So that's where the conversation has gone to very rapidly. So we are no longer doing use case discovery as a motion. If you are doing that, then I think that that's a long road that you're going to go on before you can get to an agentic outcome.
Yeah, I think the vast majority, from my take of businesses, have been using generative AI in one fashion or the other. I think they have a good understanding of what it can do. It's great at analyzing information. It's helping you create content. It's become the new search. And you think about those are like tasks that are a little bit of a helper for you.
Yeah.
And I think you hit it right on the head that when you start evolving into the world of agentic AI, you're thinking about outcomes, right? And my observation has been, there's two ends to the spectrum here. There's people that are looking at agentic AI to automate, more simple tasks, and maybe it's multiple agents, and a lot of it happens in an autonomous fashion. There's the other end of the spectrum that they're thinking very transformationally in terms of digital labor and digital coworkers, right? And people are going to have their digital, partner that aren't just not assisting you, but you're actually partnering with it to achieve goals, right? And to make better decisions and to problem solve and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I wrote in the research note about you guys, about your mindset about digital labor is where it's all heading. You may not get there immediately. And I think you kind of hit on that through a different lens, which is it's about the outcome, right?
Exactly. And I think the other way to also think about that is, look, this gives enterprises a chance to understand their own processes with a fidelity that's just been really hard for them to do before. So I think once you have a really good agentic description of your process and you have a runbook, you have the data integrations, right? All of these are important. So you understand what data is used by your process, how does your process work, and what does good look like. Once you have that, then it lets you decide which processes need to be combined, which ones need to be expanded, which ones need to be taken out because you don't need them anymore. So that way of rationalizing the core IP that a company does, I think that's what is very exciting for me. You're right, we're at the start of that journey, but that's the way we think about agentic. So it's not really about RPA or like connecting the dots and shuffling data from one place to another. All that's important. But the reason we believe this is so exciting is this gives enterprises a chance to get insights about what they do and how they do the work and how they improve them.
Yeah, and you're unique, I think, in many ways of helping to actually empower business users, end users to create their own agents to help them do their work, which kind of brings us to, a big question I think everyone seems to be asking is, you start enabling that where end users can create their own agents. And it goes back to your comment about hundreds and thousands, right? So can security and governance keep up with the pace of AI systems as they scale? And what happens when these agents really start becoming decision makers, right? Or at least they're, helping a human being make real decisions. And, Srini, why don't we start with you on the security element, and then Ram, I want to circle back to you on how things change as they evolve from being automating something to actually helping you make a decision.
Look, I'm glad you brought back to the security and governance part of it, because one of the cool things about everything that Ram talked about and everything else is it's becoming a lot more easier to write these agents. It's becoming a lot more easier for businesses to write the spec and the run book, and it automatically generate the agent. So we have to be ready for an environment like that, which means that the underlying platform should have security, auditability, transparency built into it. Because if you're getting to that point where you want a business user to write the agents, which I think is the absolute right place to be in, you can't expect them to understand everything about security and compliance. If I'm deploying this agent that's going to operate in Europe, like it needs to follow the GDPR compliance and know what's going on there, that cannot be pushed up to the business user. That has to be embedded into the platform so that you can actually drive the types of outcomes and generate speed, because the underlying platform is going to give you speed. But what's going to slow it down is not taking into account these things that you have to deploy into the enterprise setting. So we've seen this over and over again. I think everything you guys talked about was fantastic. One of our first agentic use cases that we've enabled as an example is renewing certificates on servers. Like if you've ever been a CIO, like that is the bane of your existence, because every couple of years you have to do it. So every CIO knows when it actually renews. But there's complexities in that process, such as who's issuing the certificate, and depending on who's issuing it, you really have to wait for 2 days or 1 day like that. So the amount of time an operational engineer spends waiting for things to happen, and even after all of those controls you put in, suddenly one day you get woken up saying like servers are down, certificate expired, right? So we've actually gone out and automated it, right? And so for certificates that are issued by Rackspace, it's autonomous, right? Like, because we know who's issuing it, we know the process. It takes about 20 seconds for me to ask for the certificate and get it. I can go and apply it proactively. But when it comes to an external certificate where I have to go through the validation and things like that, it goes and sits with someone, right? To be able to approve it so that it gets in. But the end outcome is it's a predictable, deterministic process. And that's my like Ram and I talk about the crawl, walk, and run, right? You start with things that are deterministic, right? Automated. He mentioned RPA. For me, it's kind of like if you've trusted RPA to do something, there's your first target of implementing agentic, because agentic allows you to loosely couple it, which kind of gets out of this whole, the data, the process is captured in this thing. So this is getting to be pretty exciting, but for us, it's coming down to security, the making sure that the guardrails for compliance, like who gets to access what agent, what is an agent allowed to do, right, from an RBAC control and all of that other stuff, is fundamentally core. In addition to that, we're also taking away things like, in order for you to talk to the backend servers, you've got to be able to talk MCP into the backend servers. And if eventually, when you get to the run stage and you want agents to talk to agents, I need to support A2A, right? So that the agent can discover what the other agent can do and call it himself. But that's in the future. But unless you put it into the foundation, you're constantly dealing with tech debt. And in this AI world, tech debt doesn't take years. It takes 3 months. And I got to go back and fix something that I just built 3 months ago. So that's core. And that's one of the key things that I keep stressing from a Rackspace standpoint. So if we know what it takes to run this in production, we're going to kind of have to engineer it into the build process and leverage tools such as Sema4, platforms such as Sema4 that actually do kind of share that runbook idea, right? And how do you actually go do that? Which is why I'm excited about this partnership.
And Ram, when we get into decision making, obviously decisions have to be accurate and explainable, which is what stands for in your SAFE framework. How does the decision making element of this start to change the game a little bit?
I think it's about control, because the business user now, if they want to change the decision that the agent is going to make, how do they do that? They go make a change the runbook, and then they go push a button, and now you got a new agent that implements the new decision-making framework. A business user and CI/CD, those words have never been used in the same sentence, right, in corporate IT. So to Srini's point, I think this is where we're pretty excited, is that we think that this unlocks velocity, but only if we can guarantee that the business user can do this with confidence. So the decision making is for me, it's like a two-stage rocket. The first stage is the business user building the agents that they want, and then changing the agent that they want the way they want it. In fact, we find that, our agents we like to say they're like English, SQL, and Python. So if you take an agent that's been in use for a while, 90% of the changes that people do to that agent is in the English. But that's where they want to tinker. That's where the business user is constantly making small changes and improving the agent in small ways. So having a proper secure, safe deployment process for them to do that. That's step one. And then the nice thing about agentic decision making, at least the way we do it, is end to end, the process is audited. There is a forensic trail of every interaction. It's not just like, what did the user try to do? What did the agent say to you? What did you do in the back end? What did you send to the LLM? What came back from the LLM? What questions did you ask? What were the responses? The entire chain of custody for that transaction. What that lets us do then is every agentic interaction is a learning opportunity, both for things that are working properly that we want to do more of and things that are not working properly. So I think this is where, and to be clear, we are at the start of this journey.
Yeah.
So this continuous improvement for agents is not something that anybody should be claiming they do really well today, because we're, as an industry, we are learning how to do this better. But I think that's a promise, is that safe deployment today, continuous improvement in the future. That's kind of how we are approaching this.
And part of what Dom's spot on, but part of it, like, where we're all in the learning process, where we're going through is great. You have to kind of do this, but if you think about the concept of agency, right, in a process like this, agency starts at the business user, but at some point in time transfers it to the like run book that's executing it, to the reasoning thing, to eventually the server that goes in. How do I kind of keep track of that? If you made a change and that change was accurate in the run book, but the outcome that you got was not what you expected, how can I kind of walk it back and explain it is a big part of it, right? We say auditability, we say those things, but and Ram's spot on. We are dealing with it real time, right? And trying to figure out like what is the thing that we put in and how do we put the controls in within an enterprise so that they can be confident and trust the outcome that comes out on the other end.
Yeah, and I think this is really key. We had this concept of a model, if you will, here at theCUBE research, the trusted autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And we're doing a lot of research on this. Actually, we're running right now an Agentic AI Trust Index that we're out in the field with, as we speak here, and we'll see what people say. But I think you guys are definitely onto something here, which I'm curious to what you guys see as the best practices for building a winning AI agent, sort of reference architecture that sort of comes that underlying capability and the approach that allows these things to actually work together.
Ram, do you want to start?
Sure, I can. I think, look, a lot of this is, and with Srini and I are going to be riffing off of each other, I think, because I think it has to do with building your agent around open standards and protocols wherever it makes sense. So your agents need to do things in the real world. So they need to be able to access tools, as they call it. But of course, the tools are really your back-end, massive line of business systems we're talking about. They need to access data, structured and unstructured data, in a proper sort of a way that lets you plug into everything you have, right? So I think this is where the MCP protocol as a foundational element for how you think about the skills that an agent need and how you activate them, that layer I think is super important. I think similarly, the reference architecture has got to be flexible to be compatible with your organization's LLM security policies. So things like content filtering, privacy protection, ethical considerations, like all the things that you as an organization, enterprises have been very quick, I think, to build out like an AI center of excellence. So the agentic architecture has to fit into that. So we've taken the view from day zero that the way we use language models is a critical part of that. So our agents run in the customer's environment, not the other way around. So that means that lets you then be compatible with all of those considerations from a security and governance standpoint. And then I think that the other piece there is that you want to make sure that there is a good amount of transparency of outcomes so that you can actually say, like, here is the agentic workflow. And this agentic workflow has a particular role in my enterprise architecture. Even if it is something as simple as, let us say you have a large 500-page document and you want to ask interesting questions about it. One approach would be to give the document to the LLM and have it do this automatically. At that point, you don't know what it is doing with the document. The other approach is to have a boundary or a firewall between the agentic execution and reasoning loop and data access. So I think that's part. So these are like the three core elements that I see. If you build your agentic reference architecture around that, And we have good examples of this, both on the Rackspace side as well as the Sema4 side, about what this reference architecture looks like. That's the way that you can start to build some of these foundational pieces in a way that I think is very enterprise ready, if you will.
Yeah. That's again, I think you'll see us basically agree on a lot. Like it's the reason why the partnership is very, very important. When we look at the enterprise architecture for agents, like in an enterprise setting, the more technology evolves, many of the good practices still stay the same, right? Like I look at it as primarily a three-tier architecture where, like, you have the thing that's calling these functions, right? Whether it's a human or an agent or an outside system. Then you have the core of how this runbook is executed, which is kind of where Sema4 and others play in. And then you have the backend systems that I still have to connect to, which is where MCP and others come in to make sure that it's there. You have to have these things be loosely coupled. And one of the things that Sema4 does, which is pretty cool, he mentioned it, it runs in our environment, right? Like, so the agents run in my environment. So like how we use the LLM is based on our standards, right? Like, so if we're deploying it into our if we're deploying it into our AWS tenant, I can use AWS Bedrock's underlying things for how do I want to mask data, which data do I want to make visible in others. And Sema4's agents operate within that. So now I can actually start putting in place a security and observability, the auditability end to end across these three tiers and not just in one place. And the problem with many of the other solutions out there is it's a bolt-on, which means I've got to now figure out how to make a lot of these things happen everywhere, right? So what we're working with our reference architecture is identity, access, role-based stuff is done in one place. Once that's done, can I carry it through, right? And how do I kind of track that to see who made changes, when, and how? And that goes a long way to that trust index you keep talking about, right? If we can actually validate it, that's fundamentally what we're trying to do, which is, I can't say it enough. I think the approach that Sema4 took, it was almost like a gift to us because we were looking at other platforms like Crew.ai and other types of things that do that. And they do a phenomenal job of focusing on the builder. And it's important that you focus on the builder. But 98, 99% of an agent's lifetime is going to be spent in production if you build things that need to operate. So we've got to kind of think that. And these guys were the first to actually come out and talk about it.
Yeah, and who are the developers in the future? And yeah, I mean, I can tell you just, again, my observation, having been really focused on this for well over a year, is, priority 1, 2, and 3 is trust, trust, trust. Yep. They're all different facets of the word trust. Because if these are really going to be deployed and used by real humans, and they're going to do more and more and more, they got to be trustworthy, right? So, yeah. All right, well, awesome. Unfortunately, I think it's time for us to wrap up here. I really thank you guys for taking the time to be here. This has been a great conversation. I think some really great advice for everyone to think through here. And for our audience here, I think what we've heard today is Sema4.ai is pioneering a new generation of enterprise-ready AI agents with a mindset around the evolution to digital labor and digital coworkers, right? That mindset, I think, is critical. They're also pioneering trusted, safe agents as a top priority and empowering end users to create their own digital coworkers with full governance and safeguards. Really important stuff. And with a horizontal platform that's built for explainability, human in the loop, all those different types of controls, Sema4 is not just helping companies, build AI faster, they're deploying it responsibly, right? And then with the power of Rackspace Technology delivering much needed expertise and integration services and an operational scalable platform across all different clouds, this partnership is going to help companies, speed their ability to go from concept into production, even in the most demanding and complex environments. So really great stuff. I appreciate you guys being here. Go visit Sema4.ai, the portal on the AI Agent Builder Summit portal, and also Rackspace.com to learn more about how they can bring Agentic AI mission to life with industry-leading hybrid cloud and AI expertise. I really appreciate you all being here. We'll talk to you on the next round. Thanks again. We are the leader in enterprise tech news and analysis. We'll see you next time.